Welcome to Hate to Wait, where two lifelong dieters talk about their current struggles with weight loss. Diets, we've tried them all. We are not doctors. We don't play them on TV or on this podcast. Join our journey because we're all in this together. Hey everyone, it's just me today on this bonus episode of the podcast. John and I have not been able to record for the past 2 weeks because of some health issues that have popped up for John, but he's on the mend and expects to come back soon. And we wanted to let you know what's going on. So we are working to get you new episodes as soon as possible. And in the meantime, I wanted to let you know that we always record live in the Hate to Wait discussion group. And we have about 3 or 4 episodes over there. So if you haven't checked those out, you can go check those out before they even come on here on the podcast. So you're welcome to watch live. You can head on over to the Hate to Wait discussion group on Facebook. That's at hatetowait.com/Facebook. And you can catch us there every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. This week, we have a different kind of episode for you. I'm joined by my friend Carolyn Cohen. She is from the podcast Wellness While Walking. She's been a health coach for 10 years, which grew out of a decades-long interest in health after rebelling against her health nut mom backfired. And I wanted to have her on the podcast to talk about some of the wellness messages and perhaps myths we were brought up on and are now finding we have to unlearn in our own health journeys. She shares tips for helping us get more veggies into our diets, something many of you have posted as goals in our Sunday goal post. And I'm so grateful that she's also going to help put to bed the myth that we all need to get 10,000 steps a day, as well as some other health myths that can sometimes leave us feeling like health and wellness is an impossible feat. I'm so grateful to Carolyn for coming on last minute and sharing so much of her knowledge with us. So without further ado, let's hop into this discussion with Carolyn. Yay! Hello, everybody. Hello, Facebook. I'm so happy that you guys are here. We have a special guest. This is Carolyn Cohen.
Hey, everybody.
And we are so grateful to have her on. She's going to be talking to us today. She is a mom of 4 and the host of the Wellness While Walking podcast, which I've talked about on the show many times. So thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I'm so glad to be here. I have to say, Emily, I hope I don't offend you. I know you so well, but I don't know John and I'm missing him today. I would love to meet him. So, I think he's the best. So I wish him well. And sorry, I'm not going to get to meet him today.
Not today, but every time I listen to your podcast, I always think, I have to talk about that on Hate to Wait. I have to talk about this on Hate to Wait. So I was so happy that we were able to get you on and have you come on and talk to us because there's so many hints and tricks and tips that you talk about on Wellness While Walking that I think our audience and our Facebook group would really love. So thank you for being here, Carolyn.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. How did you first get into being a health coach? Aside from having the mom.
Yeah. So I had the mom and I sort of rebelled. I mean, it was a little bit restrictive. I talk about that a bit on the podcast. I grew up pretty restricted in terms of what I ate. And of course, then I rebelled when I got the first chance, which was basically being able to walk to town before religious school. And I would buy the biggest, not my favorite, the biggest candy bar I could get, because I just was all about quantity because I had been so deprived. And that kind of continued throughout my teen years where I gained a lot of weight. I went to summer camp. They would, try to feed kids the cheapest food imaginable. And I had never had white bread and butter. I'd never had it. So they would put that out like 10 minutes before they served any meal, every meal, because they're like, oh, if we fill these kids up on cheap white bread, and it probably wasn't even butter. It was probably margarine. That'll save us a bunch of money. So, but for me, that was such a novelty. And my parents came up and they had to bring me new clothes because I had gained so much weight that first year of trying bread and butter. So anyway, I rebelled and then that was all well and good. But then I started to not feel so good. It took it took many years of, not being so healthy. And I really started to not feel so great. I had different things like I was diagnosed with IBS. I think I was one of the first people diagnosed with that. Like they had just sort of kind of coined that phrase. And
oh, wow.
and I had other issues. I talk about some of my diagnoses on the podcast.
And you were diagnosed with prediabetes, right? Was this then or was this later?
I was, yeah. That was actually later, and I had already changed a lot of what I was doing, but not enough or not the right things. So anyway, I had sort of a long battle. And my little motto to myself was, well, like I kind of thought of our digestive systems almost like a tube. And I'm like, it doesn't really matter what you throw in there. You know what I mean? You need enough like to give you energy. And then I started to see, because the refrain was always not me, because I was only fed really healthy food, but that, people had been eating a lot of junk foods during the time I was growing up. And I'm like, oh, they're all fine. They're fine. See, it didn't really matter. There's no difference. You know what I mean? And even I had some, like health issues, and I had been, fed pretty well, at least when my mom could control what I ate. And I was like, it really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. And I started to realize like there were so many things that were happening, not just to me, but out there in the population that really couldn't be explained away as chance. There were so many upward trends of so many things. And I started to open my mind up a little bit to the fact that, what we do, how we treat our bodies, it does matter. And I knew I didn't want to feel the way I was feeling at a pretty young age for the rest of my life. So I started to open my mind up to things a little bit, and I did start to feel better, and it was super empowering. And I've come a long way on my journey, but it didn't happen overnight. It was it was years of baby steps and steps backwards and so on. But when I realized I could make myself feel better from different chronic diseases that I had, and I also could see my kids who had a whole host of allergies also feel better, then I just decided, you know what, like I'm too old to go to med school, but and I probably couldn't have retained a lot of what they have to learn. But I just thought I really want to do something with this. I want to help other people because it isn't hard. It can be fun, and I'm not all about health for health's sake. Like I don't think that the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow is healthy and your numbers show it or whatever. It's like a vehicle. It's so that you can live the life that you want to live. I really wanted to help people also see that they could potentially change small things that might be a little challenging or might be less challenging than they thought, and might be fun and might be gratifying and feel better, and then have the energy and the level of wellness to go do life.
I love that so much. And I love that you touched on the small things. And that's something that you talk a lot about on the podcast are the small things that people can incorporate. And you have this idea on your podcast about being your own subject of experiments. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think our audience, especially what me and John seem to do with ourselves every week, is we'll try something new and we're trying it on ourselves. We're not telling other people to do it. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I love that idea.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. I was a psychology major in college, and I read a lot of studies. And the first thing that they tell you in a study is how many people were in the experiment. And so it'll say N equals, 527. But I really like to look at what I do as everyone should be their own N. There should be the N of one, and they're the subject of their own study. And I think it's really important. Unfortunately, our system isn't set up so that there's a professional who's going to oversee your every move and help you like sort through all the things that you do and kind of walk through the weeds with you. You know what I mean? Unfortunately, that doesn't exist. And so we need to take on a little bit more of the responsibility of our health situations than probably we want to. Let's face it. I would love for someone to come in and say, do this, do that, do this, do that. It's based on evidence. It's based on, your own preferences. It's based on your own life.
And they should just know all that clearly. We just want to hire somebody to come in and already know, okay, so your mom, let's just reverse some of that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It's all like scannable. I have a little barcode on my forehead.
Yeah, we have a QR code. They just put their phone over and they're just like, oh,
I know you. Yeah.
Low fat Cheez-Its, honey. Let's take that out of the healthy category, Emily.
Oh my God. Or my meals where I actually ate, I vividly remember I would eat Red Hots for dinner. That's good. Okay.
Oh my goodness. Well, I saw the whole fat free on gummy bears and was like, great, free reign. Wonderful.
Yeah. I know. that's the other thing that kind of gets me. I try to really be positive, but I have to say we've been sort of put in this really awful position of fighting an uphill battle in so many ways. Unfortunately, we've, here in the US anyway, we've been misled so many times about what is healthy for us. And it's not all that they didn't know. A lot of it, I mean, it's almost, you could almost laugh about it, except it has killed people. So seriously, the sugar people threw the fat people under the bus. And when I say fat people, I mean the people who make olive oil and the people who have dairy farms and make butter and stuff like so. The sugar people were quite heinous and really lied and misled us. And that was 2 decades at least of really a lot of misinformation that I still feel like we unfortunately are still dealing with. It's really hard now for some people to embrace fat as something that we need.
Yeah. We're looking at avocados like, no, you're the good kind of fat.
Yeah. Please come to me.
Yeah.
We have that. We have a food system that's screwed up where, like I was alluding to earlier, the wrong foods are made cheaper, so they're more enticing. And, it's through subsidies and other programs that are really hard to dismantle. We also are swimming in a sea of toxins, and there are toxins everywhere. And the way things work in the US is that the companies are allowed to just introduce new substances. And then we have to fight and prove that they're bad. And that's really hard to do. There only have been, I want to say, fewer than 20 of the tens of thousands of chemicals that have been introduced to the consumer product world. I want to say like 20 have been pulled off the market. It's incredibly onerous. And the thing about toxins that we don't really think about is that many of them are what they say obesogenic. So they screw up our hormones. It can screw up reproductive hormones and so on, but it can lead to weight gain. And so here we are. It's much harder to get healthy food. It's more expensive to get healthy food. We've been misled about what is healthy. We have these things floating around that we often don't realize, can't see, hard to get rid of, that also contribute to some of our health woes. There are so many things that have kind of been stacked against us. And so it's frustrating because it's not our fault that we're in this situation where a lot of us have chronic diseases. Chronic diseases are through the roof, and we can come back to that because it's an interesting time because there's this huge, obviously, infectious disease.
Yeah.
But chronic disease is really the biggest burden that we face right now. Anyway, long story short, we kind of have to be in charge, and it kind of stinks, but that's the reality. And so I like to try to make it fun where we're just using our senses of curiosity and wisdom and trying to figure out really what works for us and how we can make that easier.
And you talk about all these things in our life that all of a sudden, that many of us were not even aware of. And then all of a sudden we become aware, and it's like, oh God, it's just one more thing in this world trying to kill me. If it's not my 3-year-old toddler, it's marketers on TV trying to tell me that this toxin or chemical is healthy. And I don't know because I don't have the time to go online and check and look at the studies that are done. And I think you mentioned this on an episode, when you see the new chemicals come out, it's kind of perceived as innocent until proven guilty. And that's not necessarily the way to look at these new things. So I love that. But one of the things that you do talk about on your show are tiny changes that we can implement into your life. And one thing that we do in the Hate to Wait discussion group is we have a goal post every Sunday. And you've seen this, and many of our members and listeners like to set small goals for the week. So they set out small goals, and I know that you talk about on your podcast, these small changes that can make a difference. Can you give some examples, maybe somebody who sees that goal post on Sunday and their mind goes blank? That happens to me all the time. Is I'm like, oh yeah, I scheduled this, but I don't have a goal. Like, can you maybe give us some examples of some wellness goals that we can put into our lives?
Sure. So like as a health coach, I really would normally work with somebody individually and have them really generate what they want to work on and what they can, envision as a goal that they might want to set. And so it's a little different to, talk to so many people, and not everything applies to everybody, but I try to phrase it as, at least because I'm in this little bit of an uncomfortable position because I am sort of making blanket statements, whereas what I do is so individualized. So I try to phrase it as a menu, and kind of think about what does work and what doesn't work for you and picking, like I encourage people to pick one thing to work on. So, in terms of, let's say, nutrition, I think that I love to see people consider adding in, a serving or two of vegetables a week. I hope that that isn't all seen as, I can't do that. It's too daunting. But, if that is the case and they still want to do it, if I were working one-on-one, we'd work through ways that it could happen. And then what would be perceived obstacles to that happening. I ran out of time or whatever, and how you could go about getting around those so you could still realize your goals. So that's a more individualized approach. But anyway, so like, let's say nutrition, and we want to add in a couple of servings of vegetables. Well, first of all, in the Northern Hemisphere, it's a great time to do that because we have so many great things to choose from that are, different. So it could be that we find a farmer's market and go look around and pick something like from two different color categories and talk to the farmer and, the person manning the stand, if you have the ability to, and ask, what do you do with this? Like, what is this? How do what do you do with it? How do you enjoy it? And so on. And it's nice to have Google at our fingertips. I have a whole bunch of cookbooks, but I almost never use them anymore because I just think it's so fun to just put, the ingredients I have in and see what comes up. And I always put in the words easy or quick.
That's a really good tip.
And they're not the same. Easy is like kind of just, it could still not be quick, but I like easy and quick.
Yeah, I'll do that with, I'm like, 5 ingredient recipe. Do not give me more than 5.
That's one of my favorite Google searches is 5 ingredient dinners. Yeah, it was like fantastic. And there are so many great things. So just along those lines, like let's say we're making something in the oven. If I can take the time to have, HALVE, have a bunch of Brussels sprouts and throw them in with some olive oil and some seasoning and let them crisp up. It's just almost no extra time. It just takes a minute. And actually, if they're really small, you don't even have to have them,
So you can do that while something is in the oven?
Yeah, well, something else is in the oven. You know what I mean? I just put it, or sometimes, some of my favorite 5 ingredient meals are sheet pan dinners, where you just put in like 3 different things. They all cook at the same time. Or sometimes it's like you put the chicken in first and then you add in the cut up vegetables that take less time or whatever. Season the whole thing with the same way, and you've got one pan to clean up. I mean, so just adding things in that way, I think is great. If you're making a sauce or a stew or something, just adding in a few extra vegetables, and frozen vegetables are so incredibly easy and helpful. And frozen vegetables are frozen right at the field oftentimes. And so they make, oftentimes they can be even better than fresh unless you are at your farmer's market and getting things fresh. Like, it actually is not a compromise at all. So if you buy a bag of chopped spinach, you know what I mean, and you put a bunch of it into a stew or a sauce of some kind, sometimes it's barely noticeable, but you're getting that bump, and you're getting also a bump in volume. So you're filling up a little bit more also. So there's so many benefits and little tips and tricks for getting more vegetables in. People sometimes don't want to pay for convenience, and I get that. I really do. But just something that we should know, which is so interesting, is that in terms of like our income, let's say we're doing a pie chart of the income of people from like the 50s to the 70s to, 2000 to now 2020, the little pie chart piece that was your spending on food has diminished so much because of all this cheap subsidized food that we have, at least in the US. We have spent less, and we've gotten used to spending less. And sometimes I really try to encourage people to, so-called splurge a little bit on the convenience items if it's going to help you with your goals. So if it's going to help you get more vegetables in, then consider, when you see those beautiful sliced up vegetables in the refrigerator case or on the salad bar, like, don't feel bad about taking advantage of that, because we used to spend a lot more on our food. So spending a little bit more on healthy food it might not be possible, but we should at least consider. But like I said, frozen vegetables are both cheap and healthy, and I think, and easy. So I'm a big fan.
And I didn't know that, because I had always heard that frozen vegetables, you shouldn't have frozen vegetables because all the good stuff is basically frozen out of them. So for me, in my head, and I'm sure for others, they sometimes think, oh, well, what's the point of adding frozen vegetables if there aren't any nutrients? I'm just going to eat more ice cream or something like we just throw everything out the window and go in the complete opposite direction because we're like, oh, my frozen vegetables aren't good enough. They're not healthy enough because I've done that so many nights.
Yeah, no, they're great.
It's also interesting that you mentioned the price because one thing I was doing an Instacart order with my husband last night and I wanted strawberries and he was like, well, there are these strawberries, but they're out. How about the organic ones or something? Well, the organic ones are $2 more or something. And I'm like, well, here's the thing. And maybe strawberries are a bad example, but if it's like, you see like freeze-dried strawberries or strawberries in syrup or something full of sugar and it's $1 or something instead of organic strawberries where you're paying $5. And I told my husband, I was like, here's the thing about spending more on the healthier version of that. I would rather spend a little bit more now than have a doctor's bill in 20 years because of the crap I ate. Like those doctor's bills are going to be insane if I just keep eating crap because I'm too cheap to get the better food for me.
It is so true. It's sometimes not the most motivating reason. I'm glad for you that it was and that you could conjure it in the moment. Like sometimes it's just hard to imagine, but you're absolutely right. And it's just another one of those things that we have to sort of do for ourselves, which is that it's hard to envision the future. I think something that we've talked about together is we are living longer. There are, miracles of modern medicine. What I've learned, and I love to listen to older people and their wisdom, and especially I've read a lot about people's regrets because I feel like they're telling us this stuff. Like, why wouldn't we listen, right? And one of the most impactful things I've read is how people say, like, take care of yourself, put yourself on the list, take care of yourself, take the time, the resources to do that, because you might live longer thanks to modern medicine, but you might not feel good for the last couple of decades of your life. And so I know it's just hard when you're making a decision about, spending significantly more between 2 packages of strawberries or really anything, the decision to do anything that might benefit you. It's hard to remember, but I try to conjure the sentiments of those older people who were looking backwards and saying, like, I wish I had taken better care of myself.
Yeah.
So yeah, I applaud you for thinking about the doctor's visits down the road and so on, as it does have implications, which is not to say that like we should punish ourselves when we do something that isn't in line with that, but it is a nice little guiding light if you can use it in a positive way.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And then another thing that you mentioned on your show that I wanted to touch on, going back to getting more veggies in, was everything but the bagel seasoning. That is a game changer for anybody who's like, oh my gosh, she's asking me to like put Brussels sprouts in the oven. But what if I don't like Brussels sprouts? Like they're so plain and they're so blah. I don't think so. I love Brussels sprouts, but adding little things like that, just getting a thing of everything but the bagel seasoning that you see Trader Joe's has it, but I've seen generic versions as well.
Mm-hmm.
And just adding that to vegetables has been a game changer for me because it makes it interesting and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I think you have to take that little extra time, like beyond making them, just to dress them up a little bit. You know what I mean? In terms of having a full fat, maybe olive oil based salad dressing, there are some on the supermarket shelves. They're easy to make. It's kind of one of my things that like, I have colleagues that make like crazy stuff, condiments and things all the time. And I'm just like, wow, I just don't have the time to make cashew cheese. I'm sorry. Like I just don't. But making a big batch of vinaigrette every week for me has been sort of life-changing because I can put it over roasted veggies. I can put it over salad and so on. It just makes it taste so much better. So finding those things that you like that you can do, they're also like a lot of times refrigerated, cut up spices and herbs and things that like are just so easy to add. And the thing about everything but the bagel, I mean, it's based on everything bagel, right? So it's like got onion, garlic, I think poppy seeds, sesame seeds, and maybe kosher salt bits, which are delicious.
Adding salt to everything is delicious. Salt is like my favorite food sometimes.
All in favor. Yeah, same here. It just makes it so great, right? It's like, it just makes it so delicious and add some fat, healthy fat in there as well. And it's just like a different thing, it's just different like than, some just, I don't know, boiled, mushy vegetable. It can just be so good.
And many of us still have childhood memories of our parents overcooking these vegetables and making them
Mm-hmm.
terrible for us. Like I still
Yes.
can't eat certain cauliflower because I'm like, my mom would just burn it. Why?
Yeah. I'm surprised. It didn't seem like a one that, people tried back in the day as much. So I'm impressed that she gave it a
Well,
shot.
because it was cheap. We were very poor. So like if I did get vegetables, they were the super cheap ones. I wasn't allowed tomatoes until I was older. I was told that was an adult food. And then I found out when I was 20, when I still hated tomatoes, my mom's like, oh, you still don't like tomatoes? Oh, that was because they were too expensive. We just didn't buy them for you.
So you weren't used to them. That's so interesting. I used to eat them like apples. My oldest childhood friend makes so much fun of me because I used to just bite into one like it was an apple. Because for me, that was like probably the sweetest thing.
Oh my gosh.
So.
Yeah. I love that like bread was this epiphany for you. I was just like,
oh my God.
White bread. What?
I could even there's even a scarier story, which is that apparently I got they used to give us these little analogy tests in school all through. And I guess they were analogies with pictures when we were super young. And my teacher told my mom, oh, the only one she got wrong was this one. And it was like, potato is to, I don't know. It was like potato is to French fry is, apple is to apple pie or something. I didn't know.
You didn't know
what the potato was.
Oh.
Yeah, potatoes were forbidden. So anyway, that, I had a few things to overcome. Yeah, so I'm all about trying to work with people to figure out what they like and then to help them figure out how to, put that into their daily lives. There's so many reasons to add in vegetables. Our genes haven't changed that much. 10,000 years ago, we started farming. And before that, we were largely hunter-gatherers. And when we were hunter-gatherers, we would eat hundreds of different plants a year, hundreds. And we are still built much the same. And so a lot of the nutrients that are in vegetables are things that are so critical. And we can try to, some of the big ones where it makes sense for the companies that make supplements, they can try to kind of single them out and produce them, and we can pop them in our mouths in the form of a pill, but they often don't get it right. That one nutrient worked because it was coupled with another nutrient that we didn't really, figure out and so on. So there are just so many reasons to try to get them in if we can. And I try to, make it fun and have people sort of do it in the way that they can. And the other thing is just, it's really great to get help from other people in your family. Like my husband, I sort of have delegated, cutting up. We try to have a plate of raw vegetables with either a hummus or something else to dip in, on the table. So I've kind of enlisted him. I mean, it was kind of funny at first because he would cut things one at a time. If you line them up, you can cut them all at the same time. It'll save you some time. Try to be gentle and so on. But kids too. And it's just it's a benefit to them. And, I do a lot of my work is based on the ideas around positive psychology. And we find that asking people for help, it helps us, but they actually feel better too. And I think with kids, they can really have a hand in helping with the meal or helping, in the garden or whatever. And they suddenly try stuff that they wouldn't have tried, So I think getting help, whether it be in frozen vegetables or on the salad bar or with your family member, I encourage us to try to ask for help.
Oh, I love that so much. That's great. For anybody who doesn't know, Wellness While Walking is about 30 to 40 minutes. She times it perfectly so that you can take a walk on your lunch break or whenever you would like. And there is a beep in the middle of the episode so that if you're walking a loop, you know when to turn around. If that beep is not there, do not email Carolyn. Send all your hate mail to me. It is my fault. I missed it once and I felt terrible. I was just like,
people are walking.
That woman is 40 minutes from her house right now. So please send all the hate mail to me if that beep is not there.
That's hilarious.
It is a great show, Carolyn. I'm so happy to. I'm so grateful that I get to edit it, even though I don't get to walk. But I have seen many people recommend to me, go get a walking desk. Just get a treadmill desk and edit while you're doing it there. And I should. But one common myth that I love that you debunked on your show was the 10,000 steps myth. Can you talk a little bit about that? Where it came from? Why did we start hearing 10,000 steps is all we need?
Right. Essentially, the podcast is called Wellness While Walking. And I walk every day and I love walking. And we as humans, it was actually one of the defining things, it is one of the defining things that makes us humans. Some animals can walk on their hind legs for a period of time, but really we're the upright ones. And that has sort of changed everything in terms of just one, being able to see predators on the horizon. So there's so many things that being upright and walkers have given to us as humans.
And we can take selfies like other animals can't because they're busy using these arms to walk.
But it wasn't like I was so wedded to walking. What I was wedded to was the idea that in health, so much stuff gets ratcheted up and you're like, I can't do that. Then we do nothing. And it just would bother me because I see all these magnets around my town, like 26.2 or 70.1. And it's like these people who are doing, marathons and triathlons and so on. I got myself a magnet. It says 0.0. I don't run. And I'm okay with it. It actually says I don't run on it. So I guess as a health coach, I just would get frustrated because I felt like people were holding themselves to these really high standards. And then when it was hard and it didn't work out and the willpower had to be used in other places, they felt terrible about themselves. And then everything sort of went out the window. And so what walking signals to me and signifies to me is that walking is really awesome. It's really, really awesome for us. There are legions of benefits for walking. And sure, if you want to go faster and you want to run, by all means, run. So it was sort of an analogy, just like not making cashew cheese. I still can eat well without making cashew cheese, right? So I was starting to get frustrated with the expectations of people. Like I made a video this week of myself making leftover greens with fried eggs on top of them, right? Because I'm going to start a greens challenge. So I figured I was making some, so I would videotape it. So like my eggs stuck, right? Like life is messy, right? I'm still going to post the video because my eggs stuck. Who cares? You know what I mean? It still was ridiculously good. It didn't look that good.
It's not going to be any less healthy because your eggs are sticky, right? We're still going to get all those great nutrients, right?
Yeah. Exactly. So I guess, things are messy and it's okay, right? So like let's just say Goop, she's like held out as like Gwyneth Paltrow's website and her whole empire called Goop. I think people think about getting healthy and then they read something there and it's not relatable. It's not doable. So walking to me was like, yeah, walking. Most of us are fortunate to be able to do so. If you have pain while you walk, it's definitely worth seeing your doctor because there might be things that can be done to change that. And maybe, you still can't walk or your environment isn't such that we can walk, but we can move in a mild manner. And I think you picked up on one of my episodes had the word moseying in it because seriously, there was a study, and this is related to the 10,000 steps thing. There was a study that showed that on average, women in midlife were moving naturally about 2,500 steps. And if they could just get up to, I think it was 4,500 steps, their rates of all-cause mortality and like death for any reason would go down, right? Significantly. Wow. And then if you moved up to, I want to say like 6,500 steps, it went up a little bit more. And after that, it almost was no benefit to adding the steps. Now, I don't want to say if you want to walk 8,000, 10,000, there are people out there who walk way more steps a day. That's so great.
I see you, Ingrid. Ingrid is our walker of the group. She is definitely our walker. Yeah. She will get all the steps for all of us. It's okay. We'll just put all of our pedometers on Ingrid.
I love that.
And then we'll get those steps, right? Because those steps don't count unless your pedometer or your phone is counting them.
So that's another thing that we should talk about because movement oftentimes happens when you don't have your counter with you.
Always. Just like you're in the shower, you get ideas that you want to write down and you can't. It's always that.
So I'm not saying there are no benefits, but I'm just saying that, the biggest benefits come from just moving more than you move essentially right now. That's really how to think about it. So we have this 10,000 steps, kind of gold standard. And I worry that people think, what's the use of walking 4,500, 5,000 steps if I can't get to 10? And that's kind of what the whole podcast is about. It's like taking kind of the low hanging fruit, taking the very next step, no matter how small it is. But just as a funny aside, like the whole thing came about because a Japanese company was making a pedometer and they wanted to call it something. So they called it 10,000 steps. And there was another little tagline, but they literally called it 10,000 steps. And then that became the gold standard. And it's been debunked in research, just like the study I told you about, but other studies as well. And so if it's motivating to you, and I had a review of the podcast after that episode aired where I talked about how it was a myth. And she said, I love my 10,000. I was like, go for it. That's great. I just don't want those of us who are put off by that, who can't fit that in or so on. It's too much to start off, that we don't stop doing it. right? That we don't stop doing it. And the other thing is just the pace. So we were talking about moseying because really it doesn't have to be a super fast pace. Like if we put one foot in front of the other, that really counts. And so there was an article that was written about the study, one of the studies that sort of debunked it. And they're like, yeah, moseying, and I was like, I love that word. I want to mosey. I want to saunter. We don't have to, movement doesn't have to be, 45 minutes and you're sweating and you're panting and so on. In fact, a lot of studies show that when we do that, when we have a big, quote unquote workout, which again, go for it. I work out, I'm all for that. But that the rest of the day, we start to give ourselves permission to sit around and not do as much because we walked, we worked out, we did this. And so it actually behooves us to think about moving throughout the day in little spurts, in non-intense ways as being awesome, right? And some of the ways that, are probably a little bit hackneyed that we've heard, you can do this. Park further away when we, I'm talking as if we don't have a pandemic, but when we go places, park further from the entrance and take the stairs.
Park further from people in general. Just even in a pandemic, just park further away.
So true. I don't need to bump into you when we're both going to our cars.
No.
If we ever go to an airport again, instead of sitting and waiting for our flight, even if we have a bag with us, like walk around and like you reminded me recently about pacing. And sometimes I'll be on the phone. I'll be like,
oh yeah,
I don't have to be at my desk right now. I can pace around. I can move around a little bit. Another little shift is like the mindset of like, I'll be the one that pops up and helps. You know what I mean? Like at my mother-in-law's house, for example, like I might let my husband take over, but then like, what, I can help too. I can get up off the couch and move a little bit. So it's just a little bit of a shift and thinking about like, are there opportunities in my day where I could increase the movement without really any pain? And I love the spreading out of the movement throughout the day. So, I think I referred to it in one episode as intermittent walking, because there was a study where like blood sugar was so much better when people walked 15 minutes after each meal, 3 meals a day versus 45 minutes at one time. So I'm not saying the 45 minutes is not good. I'm just saying, that the little spurts that don't have, where you don't have to take a shower afterwards, they're really also so good. So good.
We don't have to see those recommendations of 20 minutes a day, 3 times a week and think, okay, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 5 o'clock to 5:20, I'll be working out. And if I don't do that, clearly I'm not healthy.
Right.
I love that you debunk that and you get that out of our heads, because that mental block is what a lot of us have when we want to get healthy, is we're like, oh, well, we want to get healthy. Clearly we have to do this list of things. And then we look at our lives and we're like, oh, I can't do that list of things. That doesn't work out at all. I guess I'll just be one of those people who's unhealthy.
Right. And I just don't like the black and white. And I think that a lot of times the messages we get are just, I can't get to that level. So instead we sort of just jump ship, which I have also done.
We've all done. Yes. Well, I want to thank you for coming on. This has been so wonderful, Carolyn.
It's so great to talk to you always. And I love your show. And I love your community.
Oh, our community is the best. Our waiters are wonderful. I hope they are so happy that you came on and they got so much from this. Can we talk about how if somebody from our community wants to listen to your podcast, how can they do that?
Yeah. So, it's available wherever you listen to a podcast. So, a lot of people listen on their iPhone with the Apple Podcast app and on Android phones on, I think, Google Podcasts is called now. Yeah.
Yep. It's in Google Podcasts. I know it's in Spotify too.
Awesome. Yep. Pretty much everywhere as far as I can tell. And then if your activity is home based, you're folding laundry, you're up and down, you're gardening or whatever, it's also available on wellnesswhilewalking.com, so you can listen on your desktop or really wherever. And, sometimes people listen, they feel guilty for telling me they were driving, and I'm like, no, that's okay.
You got the information. That's the main part, because that's what they're going to do with it. They're going to get that information and then they're going to put it toward another healthy habit. If it's not walking, it's something else.
Exactly. It's that menu. Choose what works.
And you're also available one-on-one as a health coach. Where can they get that information on how to work with you?
Right now, my website is a little bit under construction. So the best way to talk to me about the possibility of doing that, and I always speak to somebody at length for free the first time, is by private messaging me on the Wellness While Walking Facebook page or DMing me on Wellness While Walking Instagram account, or just emailing me, which is wellnesswhilewalking healthcoachcarolyn@gmail.com.
And for those of you listening to the recording, those links will be in the show notes. So make sure to check that. Check out Wellness While Walking. Hang out with Carolyn. Oh my gosh, it's so much fun walking with you. I love it. It's such good information.
It wouldn't exist without you, Emily Prokop. So
you had that idea. I think you came to me before I was even offering launch packages and was just like, I have this idea for a podcast.
I was sitting on it for so long and I needed some help making it happen. And you were that person.
Yeah. So. And at that point, I was doing mall walking at that point, and I was like, this is exactly what I've been looking for. I actually put in my phone, in my app, like, is there a walking podcast? Is there a mall walking podcast? And there wasn't at the time. So I was so happy that you came to me with that and that you're now doing this podcast and it's doing wonderfully. So thank you so much, Carolyn, for hanging out.
Thank you for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
And one more thing I wanted to do with you, one thing that you do at the end of your podcast is having some gratitude. And I love that you leave 8 seconds of silence. I'll give a little behind the scenes. Yeah, exactly. She actually tells me in the recording, like, Emily, give 8 seconds of silence. And I love it. It's like, oh, okay. And I actually listen to it and I give my own gratitude. Well,
good.
So I would love to have 8 seconds of silence so we could think about something that we're grateful for.
Oh, I love that.
And thank you so much, Carolyn, for being here again. This has been such a pleasure.
I really appreciate it. And thanks for doing this podcast. I love Hate to Wait so much.
I hope you all enjoyed that as much as I did. And I'm so grateful to Carolyn again for coming on last minute and sharing those nuggets of wisdom. She is such a wealth of information and knowledge. And if I can't binge food, binging on knowledge is a pretty good second choice. So all of Carolyn's information will be in the show notes, as I've mentioned. Thank you for joining me in this bonus episode of Hate to Wait. And if you'd like to hear from more guests like Carolyn, please let us know either over on the Hate to Wait discussion group on Facebook, or you can email us at hatetowait@gmail.com. From both John and myself, later waiters.